Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a question that has echoed through centuries. What is owed for the crime of slavery? We're going to explore the economic engine of the transatlantic slave trade and break down the modern case for reparations, looking at the historical record and the legal frameworks behind it all.
You know, this thought from Maya Angelou really sets the stage perfectly. It's a powerful reminder that while we can't just erase the past, we absolutely have a choice in how we confront it. And that choice, well, it takes courage.
So let's start with a number, and it's a big one. 12.5 million. That's the estimated number of African people who were forcibly ripped from their homes during the transatlantic slave trade. Their lives, their labor, everything stolen. It's a scale of human tragedy that's almost impossible to wrap your head around, but it's so essential to acknowledge.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Well, to understand the call for reparations, you first have to grasp one fundamental truth. Slavery wasn't just some side story in America's history. No, it was the economic engine, the very thing that powered the entire nation, both North and South.
This timeline really shows you the deliberate design behind it all. I mean, look back to 1663. Settlers in the Carolinas were literally given more land based on how many people they enslaved. This was not an accident. It was a business model from day one that incentivized human trafficking. Then, boom, the cotton gin comes along in the 1790s and just supercharges the demand for labor. And by 1860, that economic loop is complete. You've got mills in New England processing almost all of America's cotton, and pretty much every single thread of it was picked by the hands of enslaved people.
And this exploitation, it went way beyond the cotton fields. Just look at this document. It's an 1852 bond, and it's for the leasing of an enslaved man named Harry to a railroad company. His labor, and the labor of countless others, was a commodity to be bought, sold, and leased out to build the nation's infrastructure. Enslaved people were staffing industries, laying those railroad tracks, and generating huge profits for companies, their entire lives reduced to a line item on a balance sheet.
Senator Charles Sumner just hit the nail on the head with this phrase. It perfectly captures that economic relationship. You had the lords of the lash in the South and the lords of the loom in the North. They were partners in profit, two ends of the same brutal economic pipeline, tied together by the cotton trade.
And you can literally see the results of this alliance built into the American landscape. The incredible wealth generated by slavery didn't just stay in the South. Oh no, it flowed north. It funded textile mills, it capitalized banks, and it launched insurance companies. And get this, firms like the Nautilus Mutual Life Insurance Company of New York actually sold policies on the lives of enslaved people. Think about that. They turned human beings into insured financial assets.
So, the big question is, how was this enormous system of economic exploitation even possible? Well, it was all built on a foundation of profound, systematic dehumanization. A system designed to strip people of their very humanity, with consequences that would echo for centuries, long after abolition.
This whole system was enforced through calculated, relentless brutality. You had legal codes like the French Black Code in Louisiana that didn't just allow for cruelty, they wrote it into law. They explicitly defined people as movable property and gave enslavers the right to torture them. And the violent separation of families at the auction block, that wasn't some tragic side effect, it was a routine, cold hard business practice. To really get a sense of how deep this dehumanization went, it's actually really helpful to compare it to a standard that we've all globally agreed upon for how to treat enemies in wartime. And when you put them side by side, wow, the injustice is just laid bare. Under the Geneva Convention, an enemy soldier captured in war must be treated humanely. They can't be mutilated, they get to contact their family. Now look at the condition of an enslaved person, legally defined as property. Torture? Permitted. Families? Destroyed at will. There was zero rights, zero legal recourse. The system denied them the most basic human dignities that we grant to soldiers in a war.
So you might think, okay, 1865, emancipation, problem solved, right? Well, not exactly. The system didn't end, it just changed its shape. The physical chains were broken, sure, but new barriers were immediately put up. We're talking about court-enforced segregation, redlining and housing that prevented homeownership, and discriminatory access to education and jobs. This locked in economic exclusion for generations, creating a cycle of disadvantage that just kept compounding over time.
So, given this entire history, this legacy of economic exploitation and systemic dehumanization, what is the proposed framework for repair? What does that even look like?
And it's really important to understand that the modern call for reparations isn't just a political slogan somebody came up with.
The source material grounds it in established international law, specifically a UN General Assembly resolution that recognizes the obligation of states to provide reparation for these kinds of gross violations of human rights.
And here's the crucial part. Under this international law, reparations means so much more than just writing a check. It's actually a comprehensive framework built on 5 pillars. There's restitution, rehabilitation, and compensation, yes, but there are also guarantees that the harm won't be repeated, and something called satisfaction, which includes things like public apologies and official acknowledgments of the crimes that were committed.
Okay, so this, of course, leads us to the biggest practical question of all. How could a program of this sheer scale and complexity actually work? And the question everyone asks, how could it possibly be funded?
Right, let's tackle the elephant in the room head-on, the funding. We're going to look at the economic framework that the source material proposes for this. The sources point to this economic framework called Modern Monetary Theory, or MMT. Now, the core idea is pretty revolutionary, but it's also simple. It says that a government that issues its own currency, like the United States, isn't constrained like a family or a business. It can't go bankrupt in its own currency because, well, it's the one that creates that currency in the first place.
And this is where the whole debate gets reframed. From an MMT perspective, the argument that a nation can't afford reparations isn't really an economic fact. It's a political statement. The real limits aren't about the amount of money available, but about political will and the decision to allocate real resources. The question totally shifts from, can we pay for it, to, do we choose to pay for it?
So if the money isn't the real obstacle, what would this actually look like in practice? Well, the sources lay out a few key approaches to tackle those specific lingering harms. It's not just one single policy, but a whole portfolio of them. A federal job guarantee to fight underemployment, canceling student debt, which we know disproportionately burdens people of color, and direct payments to start closing that staggering racial wealth gap, using models that have been used before, like the Japanese-American redress movement.
But this vision for repair doesn't just stop at one country's border. The argument is that because the system of exploitation was global, the remedy has to be global too. And that means confronting and actually reforming the international financial institutions that were set up during the colonial era and, as the argument goes, continue to fuel these inequalities.
So we're talking about some huge, fundamental changes to how the world is run. The proposals include reforming the UN Security Council to be more representative and limit the veto power of former colonial powers. They call for restructuring the IMF and the World Bank to give nations in the Global South a real voice. They even propose creating a new international reparations fund, with mandatory contributions from former colonizing countries, treating this historical debt with the same seriousness as, say, NATO defense spending. The logic is crystal clear. You can't repair the damage while leaving the damaging systems in place.
And so we end up right back where we started, with that question of courage. This debate, at its heart, isn't just about economics or law. It's about how we define justice across generations. When history leaves a debt of this magnitude, what does it truly mean to pay it? That's the fundamental question this whole topic asks of every single one of us.